And this can be important for the transport of things like heat and nutrients. And we think this is important to heat exchange between the ocean and atmosphere and to life in the ocean.
So, from what I gather, when you head out there in April, this is going to be a huge production. Do you want to describe some of the moving parts involved?
Yes, there is a lot going on in S-mode. We'll have 3 different aircraft making measurements from different altitudes. We need to measure a lot of things like the ocean currents, ocean chlorophyll, ocean temperature, and heat exchange between the ocean and atmosphere. So we'll have 3 aircraft, a NASA Gulfstream aircraft at high altitudes, a NASA King Air B200 at intermediate altitudes, and a Twin Otter aircraft at low altitudes. And we'll also have a research vessel, an oceanographic research vessel, and a bunch of robotic ocean vehicles.
So a lot of effort going on here. What's the big payoff? Why such a big effort to put this experiment into action?
Well, the oceans can hold a huge amount of heat. If you took just the upper meter of the oceans and cooled that 1 meter of water by 1 degree and put that heat in the atmosphere, it would be enough heat to heat the whole planetary atmosphere by 1 degree. So the heat transport to and away from the ocean surface is really important.
Wow, in terms of the climate impact, I can see that.
Yes.
It'll help us move forward with those kind of modeling. Great. So, yeah, on a personal note, why interested in physical oceanography? We know people that study, dolphins, fishes. What interests you about the actual physical properties of the ocean?
Well, I've always enjoyed learning how things work, and I studied physics in college, and that was when I learned that there was such a thing as ocean physics, and so I became a physical oceanographer, and it's been so fun and interesting. I've gotten to go on ocean voyages all over the world and to work with people from all over the world, so it's been really a great career.
Wow, sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So we can't actually go to the ocean right now and see those instruments in action, but we can do the next best thing, because our colleague, your S-Mod colleague, Laurent Greer, brought a wave glider autonomous platform into the hangar. So do you want to go check it out right now?
Yeah, let's do.
Awesome. So the wave glider is going to be on the RV Oceanus, right? Well, here we go.
Yes. The research vessel Oceanus will go from Newport, Oregon to the region offshore of San Francisco, and it will take about 2 days for the ship to get there.
Wow, and here's Laurent, who's actually going to be in the RV Oceanus. Am I correct, Laurent? Awesome. And so you are kind of manning these wave gliders, right? So there's several of them, and you'll be they'll be under your care.
Yeah, so we'll be driving them around, trying to keep them together. So we're going to have an array and making measurement at the same time.
So yeah, it looks like a very large surfboard with a lot of complex parts, and I imagine it cruising on the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Do you want to point out some of the measurements it's making?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to make measurement both in the air and in the water. So for example, this sensor is a weather station, so it's going to measure the wind speed, wind direction, air temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressure, rain. Another cool instrument is this 3D sonic anemometer, which gonna measure the fine structure of the airflow above the waves. In the air, we also have a bunch of GPS, which give us the position of the wave glider, but also its motion. And from its motion, we are able to retrieve the main characteristic of the wave fields, such as the wave height or the period of the waves. And then we have an ensemble of instruments underneath in the water. So these instruments allow us to measure the temperature, the salinity of the water from the surface down to above 150 meters. And along that, we also have a current profiler, which measures the current speed and direction, pretty much from the surface down to about 100 meters.
Wow, that's a lot of capability for one platform. So I'm looking at the top and it almost looks like solar panels. I'm just begging the question of how this thing moves. And I see fins, I see other things on here.
Yeah, so that's one of the cool things about the wave glider. It just uses the power or the energy of the wave as a mean of propulsion. So, and the solar panel are just to charge the battery that we use to power the instrument and the control and communication unit. And so, to give you the principle of operation is really simple. The float here stays at the surface, and the sub at the bottom, equipped with this fin, stays about 8 meters deep. And both of them moves up and down under the action of the waves. And with the help of this fin, this vertical motion is converted into horizontal motion, leading to the propulsion.
And so this is controlled by remote control back from the shed?
Yes, exactly, by satellite communication. So we know its position, its status, and the cool thing about it is that we do some real-time processing of our sensors, and we send them back to shore every 15 minutes and update. So we know the conditions they are facing, and we can adjust our operation of area and also our trajectory based on those conditions.
Wow, that's pretty high tech. That's incredible. Tom, this is just one of many instruments that are going to be in use on this campaign in the ocean. What is the special niche about this wave glider?
Well, the wave gliders and really the other robotic platforms that we'll have in the ocean will be giving us a view of the 3D structure of the ocean, and we're especially interested in the flow of water, so these will give us a 3D view of that water and how the eddies are swirling and the currents are coming together, leading to vertical motion in the ocean.
Cool, well that is very interesting.
Fleet of research aircraft will be home base for Activate scientists and crew when they begin conducting research flights out over the nearby and super conveniently located Atlantic Ocean just next month. I'm joined today by Luke Ziemba. He is the instrument scientist here at Langley for Activate. Behind us you can see the Falcon and King Air aircraft that they will be using. When I look back at the Falcon, it has all these crazy probes and sciencey looking things sticking out of the top of it. What are we looking at? What do these things do?
So for Activate, we're making lots of different measurements, so we need lots of different probes and instruments in the aircraft. If we look at the crown of the aircraft, you can see 4 inlets. On the left side, as you're looking at the aircraft, is a gas inlet that we use to bring in air and measure the concentrations of CO, CO2, and methane in the atmosphere. Next over is an aerosol inlet that we measure the properties of particles in the atmosphere, so the optical, chemical, and microphysical properties of aerosols. Next over is what we call a CVI, or counterflow virtual impactor, and that rejects those aerosol particles, and we only look at droplets that enter the probe, and then we evaporate those droplets and look at their composition. And then lastly, we have a cloud water collector, and that collects droplets inside the clouds, brings them into the aircraft through tubes, and then we collect water samples in vials that we take back to the laboratory and look at post-mission.
We have some instruments on the wings here as well. Can you tell us what those do?
The wing probes measure the cloud properties. On the right wing, we have what we call a cloud aerosol precipitation spectrometer, or CAPS, and that measures the size of the droplets and the number concentration of them. On the left wing is a similar probe that's operated by DLR, and that probe measures the number, concentration, and size of droplets, but over a different range of particle sizes.
Oh wow, so we're getting onto the Falcon here, and man, I can see that it's pretty crowded, and you don't even have everything on here yet, right? So tell me a little bit about what it's going to be like.
That's right, so we're currently integrating the Falcon, meaning we're putting our instruments on. We currently have 3 racks on the plane, and we're going to have 3 more sitting essentially right where we are on the plane.
And you have to have people on the plane too.
Right, so during flights we're going to have 2 pilots up front, but we're also going to have 2 scientific operators that will sit in front of racks and monitor instruments and keep them calibrated.
What does the Falcon do during these flights?
We're based out of Hampton, based here at home, but we're going to be flying out over the ocean So we can do local flights out over the ocean, or we can go to Bermuda and back, or target different cloud environments. Our flights are about 4 hours in duration. We fly from about 500 feet above the water surface up to about 5,000 feet. And we're porpoising between those altitudes constantly.
While you're doing that, the King Air is going to be flying too. So talk to me a little bit about what the King Air is going to be doing.
Right, so the uniqueness of Activate is that we have coordinated flights between 2 aircraft. So we're flying low, but the King Air is flying up at 9 kilometers, looking down on the scene with remote sensors. And especially with the new system, we have a drop-on system.
You actually have a dropson here in your hands. Can you kind of explain to us what we're looking at here?
Sure. The dropson has a parachute on one end and it has sensors on the other. We measure temperature, pressure, relative humidity, and wind direction and speed with the sound. We use a launcher from the aircraft and it drops at about 11 meters per second, and we get a sounding of the atmosphere as it flies.
You have 2 other instruments on the King Air. What are they?
A research scanning polarimeter and a HSRL, or high spectral resolution LiDAR. Those 2 instruments in conjunction allow us to retrieve the properties that we're measuring on the Falcon aircraft.
We don't actually have them to show you here, but we are going to take you to the lab to see the HSRL.
This is our instrument and how it's configured on the aircraft. This is a high spectral resolution LiDAR. So what we do is we send different color pulses of laser light out into the atmosphere from the bottom half of the instrument. Those laser pulses go into the atmosphere, and we collect that scattered light energy from the atmosphere with our telescope, and then direct that light into the various detectors in the instrument head. At the operator station, I can look at those various signals coming from all the detectors, getting information about the aerosols and clouds. Now, why that's important, you've already heard about the detailed measurements that the Falcon is taking as they're flying down low. Well, we're flying up high, and we're measuring, it's a remote sensor, so we're measuring from the aircraft all the way down to the surface. And we can combine those measurements from both aircraft to really get detailed information and dig into the science of how aerosols and clouds interact.
All right, so that was our behind-the-scenes look at what we're doing here at Langley to get ready for Activate. Thank you so much, Luke, and thanks to Dave Harper. Back to you at Armstrong.
Well, thanks for the report, Joe. There's a lot going on that aircraft, it seems. Well, joining me right now is actually the lead scientist for Activate. It's Armin Sarushian, atmospheric scientist out of the University of Arizona. Armin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Samson.
So it looks like your mission is in good hands, according to that video, right?
Correct. So, as we all know, clouds are a common feature in the lower atmosphere, and they're not just beautiful objects to look at in the sky, but they play a very important role in our planet's energy balance because they're very reflective. But we don't fully understand how clouds work, especially how they form and how they evolve. And so we need to change that. And it begins with understanding how do you even make a cloud droplet. So the seeds of cloud droplets are these little aerosol particles, things like dust or smoke. And when we breathe, we're inhaling large amounts of particles, and they vary widely in terms of, what they're made of and their size. So it turns out that depending on the number and amount of particles you have, cloud droplets can have very different properties in terms of their size, their composition, and their lifetime. And this leads to varied effects on weather and climate. So to understand these complex interactions between particles and clouds, we need airborne measurements, and we need information below, inside, and above clouds all at once. And it's really hard to do this with just one airplane. So Activate embraces this approach, as you just saw in the video, to use 2 planes that will fly in a coordinated fashion to get all the information we need at once. So we will do about 150 joint flights over the next 3 years over the western North Atlantic Ocean.
So, what kinds of aerosols are we looking at in this particular campaign?
What types of aerosols? Well, there's a wide range of different pollution sources that impact the western North Atlantic Ocean. That was one of the reasons we chose this region, because we need a wide diversity in terms of emission sources and weather types. So we have biogenic emissions from plants, from the ocean, we have sea salt, we have biomass burning, we have dust from Africa in certain times of the year, and we have urban emissions as well coming off the east coast over the ocean.
So, I know we've had a few campaigns that were looking at these similar processes, aerosols and clouds. We've been off the coast of Africa, we've been in the maritime continent by the Philippines, and so it looks like we're having a growing compendium of these measurements. So what's the point of having all these different measurements taking place across the world?
Yeah, so again, the science of aerosol cloud interactions, what we are struggling with, the research community, is a general lack of statistics. There are so many factors influencing cloud properties that we just need more and more and more data in different regions that are there's different types of particles, different types of weather, and so having data across the world, and what's very special about Activate is just the sheer amount of flights we're going to do is very, very large. We're going to get about 1,200 hours of flight data, which is kind of unprecedented, and so we need statistics. And so combining all these campaign data and using Activate, it's really going to help the international research community.
It's incredible. So, how did you get motivated to get into this kind of science? I mean, it's not something that people just stumble into, I'm assuming.
Right. So since I was a child, I've always been fascinated and inspired by airplanes. So although I never pursued flying myself, I've just liked looking at them and being on planes. So that one of the best parts of this research is not just being on the plane, but being able to steer the direction of flights and doing impactful research. And to sweeten it up even more for me, my background is aerosols, but my professional role model, my father, he's a hydrologist who studies precipitation. And of course, the link between aerosols and precip are clouds, which is the heartbeat of the Activate mission.
It's incredible. So following in your father's footsteps and your work informing the others' work, I think that's kind of beautiful.
Thank you, Sam.
Great. Thanks so much, Remy, for joining us. Good luck on that campaign.
Thank you.
So we're from small particles in the clouds to one of the largest waterways in the world. We're moving on to the Delta X mission. We're looking at water flow and sediment to figure out why some parts of the Mississippi River Delta are disappearing and why others are not. Joining me to talk about that is lead scientist Mark Simard from Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you, Samson.
So I'm going to start with some of the processes that are at play at the Mississippi River Delta and how you're looking at those things.
Well, river deltas form along the coast. As the water from the river meets the slow-moving ocean, the water from the river itself slows down, and the sediments that it transports toward the coast actually deposit at the mouth of the river. And as those sediments accumulate, they build up soil, so elevation of the ground goes up. So at one point, the water will be sufficiently shallow for vegetation to grow. So vegetation will contribute to the further processing of the sediments. It will help maintain the sediment in place and also potentially accelerate the capture of those sediments. And not only that, there's also an ecological process in which, as the plants grow, they produce organic material, which they inject in the ground through the roots, of course. And every year they just contribute, just like the sediment, to elevation of the ground in deltas. So Delta X looks at those two processes. So the sediment transport and deposition, and the second one is the ecological part, which is the plant organic contribution to soil elevation.
Incredible. And for those of you guys watching on NASA TV, that noise is a hangar in motion. This is a live working hangar, so don't mind that noise. Great, Mark. So let's think about all the ways that we can study these processes of what's going on in the field when you get out there this summer.
Okay, so Delta X basically uses NASA assets, set of 3 instruments that are used to calibrate numerical models. Those models will simulate the hydrology of the system, so the water circulating through the channels and across the marshes, and it will also simulate the position of sediments and the plant growth. So we use 3 aircrafts, of which 2 are radars. The radars are used to measure the hydrology of the system in the channel network and also throughout the marshes. It will look at the propagation, for example, of the tidal wave propagating upward inland in the marshes. We have a third instrument that will look at the content of sediment, so the amount of sediment that are found in the water, and it will also look at plant productivity. And that third one is an imaging spectrometer.
Wow. Well, we know that a lot of people live around the Mississippi River Delta. Do you want to talk about the importance of this research for the region?
Well, most of the deltas, the larger deltas in the world, are sinking under current sea level rise. They are threatened. So they have to accumulate sufficient soil and elevate the ground to keep up with sea level rise. In the Mississippi Delta, we're looking at almost 10 millimeters of relative sea level rise. So that includes subsidence of the ground and sea level rise itself. So it has to accumulate a lot of sediments. So we see on the monitors now the loss of land. So those red areas are the loss of lands in the Mississippi Delta. So if you take this land area that has been lost in the last few decades, we're losing land at a rate similar to one football field every hour.
So, in other words, better understanding of what to expect in the future will help inform the planning.
Yeah, so that model that we're calibrating, once it's calibrated, we can use it to predict which parts of the Mississippi Delta will be drowning under sea level rise and which ones will survive. So that way we can actually use that model to guide and support potential restoration projects.
This seems like very fascinating work. Mark, how did you get involved in this kind of science?
So, my background is physics, so I tend to like things that are complex. Not only is this system complex because of the constant, the perpetual dance between the ocean and the river, which comes in and out, but there's also the complexity due to the people.
Right.
I like people, and I think at this point science is sufficiently advanced so that it can be used to help people and care for the livelihood of those 500 million people that live across the world in these coastal areas.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mark. I agree, it's important work. You know, one of the key instruments that is going to be used for Delta X is the Uninhabited Aerial Vehicle Synthetic Aperture Radar. UAV, sir, and it happens to be right behind us. Dean Neely is going to reprise his role as NASA pilot and talk about what it's like to fly these science flights. Gucci, take it away.
Hi, welcome back. So today, as you just heard a little bit about the science mission looking down at the surface of the Earth in all different parts of the world, the aircraft behind me is what was formerly an Air Force C-20. It's a Gulfstream G3. And if you look at the white pod over my shoulder here that's at the bottom of the aircraft, that is the main science instrument. That synthetic aperture radar is what we take up high in the Earth's atmosphere, where we can fly through a very precise path repeatedly and look at slight movements down on the Earth's surface, whether it's looking at topography changes, vegetation, earthquake fault lines, any movement there, glacier movements, volcanoes, that sort of thing. This instrument here, the radar pod underneath it, has been coupled to a special precision autopilot in the aircraft that NASA's heavily modified so that the pilots can repeatedly fly through a small 10-meter tube. Think of it as like flying through a soda straw, and put that radar looking at the exact same position repeatedly, whether it's a couple of days later or several months or a year later, and look at changes on the Earth's surface. And that's an amazing thing to do. From up in the aircraft, the way we operate that is the pilots will hand fly on the normal aircraft autopilot and maneuver into using some of the symbology we have tied to that radar pod to get the aircraft and the synthetic aperture radar right where they need it, and then we couple up that precision autopilot, and then the magic starts to happen there. And that's where the observation happens on the Earth's surface, looking at just minute changes down to a centimeter, and that's how we're able to study how the behavior of the Earth itself is going. From the pilot's perspective, it's a great opportunity to fly a beautiful business jet like this in a very different environment. So typically what we're doing up there is working as a team with a radar operator in the back, and a mission director, along with the 2 pilots, and we coordinate all the action again the objective is to put that radar right in the exact spot that we had previously put it on other missions, and we can compare that data. It takes a lot of skill. It's very frantic in the last few seconds as we fly into the tube by hand and then couple up that autopilot, but it's very rewarding when you get to see some of the final product and see what comes out of the study, as you just heard a little bit about there. All right, it's a nice opportunity not to have to wear a spacesuit in this one as well. As you can see, I look a little bit more comfortable here, and I have all my senses back, and I can eat and drink and that sort of thing. So we enjoy flying this, as well as all the other platforms that you're going to hear about today that carry these amazing science instruments as we study the Earth's atmosphere. All right, Samson, back to you.
Thanks so much, Gucci. Well, there you have it, folks. 5 campaigns spread out across the U.S. tackling a diverse set of science questions. But this is only the beginning. We want you to keep following us as we cover each of these campaigns throughout the year. We'll be posting blogs, photos, videos, we'll have Q&As. We'll be giving you as much of the action as we possibly can. Please follow us on nasa.gov/Earth Expeditions for all the latest, and also follow us on social media at NASA Earth and NASA Expeditions. Thanks so much, and see you next time.